What's up, everybody? Welcome to the High Level Husband Podcast. I'm Tommy McCollister, and we back, babe, with
Yeah.
you on it. I've been doing a lot of guests lately, which has been super fun, and I've got big vision for who's coming on and in the future and whatnot. And just the last few guests have just been absolutely killing it. But we haven't been able to do one, me and you, for a couple of weeks, and so I realized that today, and I was like, we got to get one in real quick and make a fast one here. So we're going to make this one a little bit shorter, but we're going to talk a little bit on the effects of rejection. And rejection can be multiple things, but it can be, I think a lot of people, it's going to be intimacy and that area, but there's so many impacts in life on it. I know that this topic for a lot of people has always been a hot one for us in our social media. And so I'm excited. We just need to let it rip.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the hugest topic ever, especially with, I feel like, more men than women, but definitely a lot of men.
I mean, it's definitely, we get a lot of women who talk about that as well, but it is definitely more men that feel rejected. And it's crazy because it's, especially for men, it's a little bit different, right? Like yes, women want to be loved and all those different things, but it's different from men. We want significance, respect, approval, validation, like all of that different stuff from our spouse. And one of the best ways is through physical intimacy. And I'm going to share it right here. I mean, we've talked about how, 20 something years ago, I cheated on you when we were dating. And I've said this multiple times, and I'm just going to restate that right now. I would say 10% of that was like, I just want to like hook up. And 90% I was just looking for approval and acceptance. I just needed to know somebody else was down for that. And it made me feel loved.
Right.
And it was like, who's next? Who's next? Who's next? Not just because I could just have sex. Because at the end of the day, like, that's fun and all of that. And it feels good, but it's not worth sometimes the headaches or the things that come with it or hurting somebody's feelings.
Right.
But I just needed that love so bad on top of that.
Right. And it's interesting too, because you correct me if I'm wrong, because it could just be my memory. It's not like we weren't having sex.
Oh, no, not at all.
So.
Yeah, it wasn't that.
That's why you're saying it wasn't about that,
No, it definitely was not that.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
And that's, I know where that's a huge part in marriage too. People in marriage who are cheating, it's not always because they're not having sex. Now, it's so many other things it's not as cut and dry, right? Like, it's like we see a homeless person on the side of the road. So many people immediately judge and go, lazy, loser, drug addict, and they need to get a job, right? When in the reality of it is probably grew up in a really rough home, maybe was sexually abused, saw some type of really insane trauma, and then it's just like one thing after another led him to there. We don't know what actually happened. And so it's not as clean cut and dry of it and whatnot. Now, with rejection in marriage, it's not always just about, you just need to have sex so your husband doesn't feel this way. But at the same time, I would love for you to speak on that from, because we've done reels in the past. We haven't done these in a while. Maybe we just need to let them rip. But there's been a couple of ones that you did that was like, there's times where I'm tired and I don't necessarily feel like it. And I have sex with my husband, not just like as a chore, but because I know it means a lot to him. So it means a lot to him. It means a lot to me. So I'd love for you to touch on it from the women's perspective. And I'll just touch on it from the man's perspective. Is there's times where I've known like you've done that in the past, and I'm like, babe, like that's good enough just to know that you're putting in the effort, and that means more than like you actually doing it, because I'm just like, I see that you're desiring it. It's not just like, well, no, I'm going to get my rocks off, because I'm not a dirt bag that's like, okay, cool, I know, I see you're super tired, now I'm just going to pound you. Like, no, that's not who I am, nor should you be, whoever's listening to this. It's enough if we just feel desired on that, in that aspect. So I just love for you to touch on that, maybe from like a woman's perspective of like, yeah, I love you. I love who you are, blah, 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 blah. And that's part of my being a wife. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and so many women come back, and I understand their point of view, but I think they take it wrong when I say those things. That really, it's about serving my husband as I should, as the Bible says I should. And because I love you so much and I know that you enjoy it, and maybe I'm tired, but it always ends up being great. Like we've said many times too, once we get into it, it's not like I don't enjoy it, so it ends up being a bonus for me also, but yeah, sometimes if we're tired or something, we could use that all the time. I mean, when are we like not tired? Most people are by the evening or, whatever, are kind of coming down from their day and they are kind of tired, so that could be like an everyday excuse. But at some point, you just kind of have to push through that and kind of get your second wind and serve your spouse the way that they should be served, you know?
Yeah. So for example, we are, and maybe this is a bad thing about what we're about to do. We're about to coach our weekly coaching call that we do for our group. And we're about to get on there. And I said, hey, let's just record a quick podcast, kind of get warmed up a little bit before we get there, because sometimes it's hard to just go from 0 to nothing and turn it on. So we're getting warmed up. So it's just like the same thing, what you're saying. Once you get into the flow, it's usually A, pretty good. And B, it doesn't always just need to be this drawn out, lovemaking, like hour and a half ordeal. Like it can be, read the room, feel that out and go from there. And sometimes it's like, you know, not that it's just like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, but sometimes it's that as well. And it's just a little bit of everything. But that's where communication is in between all of us.
Right. If we're both on the same page of, you know, mixing, I mean, but that's what keeps, you know, your sex life exciting in a marriage. Is it doesn't always have to be the 2-hour drawn out thing, which is amazing also, but sometimes it can be a 10-minute quickie, and that's okay. And I think that's great because it mixes things up and changes things and keeps things exciting. So it's not always the same thing.
Right. And so to kind of touch on the rejection thing of it and how that actually impacts somebody is that we get rejected. It hurts. Like, and so this is for male or female. If you apply for a job and you don't get it, you think you're not enough. And the truth is, it's not that you just weren't a good fit for that position. And maybe you weren't enough. Maybe you weren't qualified enough and there was somebody that was better than you, but you're immediately going to think like negative thoughts and all these other things. That's just natural in humans as it is, unfortunately, but that's how it is. And for men, if it's just like, it's one thing if it's a random rejection, but it's not like every single time you got to say yes and da 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 da. But what it is like, if it's consistent, it's like she consistently is not interested in me. Now, with that being said, men, you have to be attractive. That is part physical, part emotional, part spiritual, and part relational.
Right. Because if you were some guy that just, or so not some guy, my husband, but if you were my husband and you didn't do any of those things, you didn't take care of yourself, you weren't reading your Bible, you weren't spiritually, you know, being a leader, you weren't doing all of these things, then I probably wouldn't serve you because you're not serving yourself. You're not serving our marriage at that point. You're not doing those things on your end to keep up. If you weren't doing those things, I wouldn't be like, oh, I just need to serve him, you know, because you're not holding up your end of the bargain. But if a guy is holding up their end of the bargain, if a husband is holding up their end of the bargain, they're being a spiritual leader, they're being an amazing husband, they're taking care of themselves physically, mentally, spiritually, all of those things, then there's no reason why we shouldn't serve them too.
Yeah. And it does come over time for that of those things. And most people, they can get to those spots, but there's always new levels of being, growing and becoming different. When you hear me speak on this so much time, you got to stand out differently. But if you're rejecting just because you're just not in the mood and all those other things, or it's not important to you, well, it is important to your spouse. Like there are things that are just not important to the other person either.
But it should, that's the key thing too. Sorry, I didn't mean to like interrupt you, but it should be important to both people. And that's a common problem too. Like maybe it's not as important to the wife, or, you know, it could, like we said, it goes both ways, you know, and it doesn't, you know, somebody's rejecting somebody, but it should be important to both people. It should be like a big part of your marriage. And if it's not, then there's other key things that need to be,
well, it's of God.
Right.
God gave us this to feel good, to connect relationally with each other, husband and wife. He says that's the time it is 100% okay, right? The Bible even says, do not withhold from your spouse unless it's mutually agreed upon for a short period of time. Now, with that being said, you can't just be like, I'm an a-hole, I beat her, I do all this other stuff, I'm a drunk, I'm all these other things, and emotionally closed off, and she's got to do that. No, that's also you being a Christ follower and doing those other things as well. And at least you're putting in the effort to become those and are becoming better in that. And so it is a fine dance, but that's where it's like, people are so weird on social media sometimes. They're like, I can't believe you guys are Christians and you're talking about sex, or you guys are talking about blowjobs and like all this other stuff. Like, it's like, have you ever read the Song of Solomon? Like there's some graphic stuff in there, right? And like, there's so many things in there that are that way, right? Or have you ever, do you think when God wanted sex between couples that he just said, okay, lay there with the lights off in the dark and don't look at each other and just get in and get out really quick, missionary position, and be done with it? No,
absolutely not.
No. Then you don't understand God and you don't understand life or anything about it. And so it's wild when people say that on those things. and it becomes special between it. So it's a huge part of marriage. That's one aspect of it, but it has to be earned in specific things. We're talking on this one specifically about the effects of the rejection of it, though. It hurts after a while. It's stinging, it's frustrating, there's it's lasting effects, and after a while it will build a wall between the two of you of frustration, and it comes out in different ways. And so you got to be very, very careful of how this is, and this goes both ways of how you're doing these things, because there are lasting effects through these things. Now they can be overcome, and the solving of the problem isn't just having sex, it's talking about these things and sharing your feelings and all of that. I just did the last podcast right this before. I don't know, maybe they're going to release this one first or the other one. I did with Theo Burgess, and he was talking about when he was going to quit his job and go to a different position. His wife was like, absolutely. And they talked about it and blah, 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 blah. They got vulnerable and they shared why he was going to do it. And all this. They talked about it and they got a game plan and moved on, even though they were going to lose drastic amount of money from him switching. Okay. Do the same thing in your sex. Everybody's okay talking about like, hey, can you hand me the toilet paper? I'm going to go take a crap. Or can you pick me up some tampons at the grocery store? But nobody wants to talk about like, hey, sex or the things around it without them getting frustrated on it. If you can't have the same talk about sex as you can have a talk about your kids or have talk about what you're going to have for dinner that night, then you got an issue. It should all be the exact same. No matter what you're talking about, it should be no change in your heart rate, tone of voice, anything. It should just be like, we're talking about dinner. Cool. We're talking about sex. Cool. We're talking about the kids. Cool. We're talking about God. Cool. We're talking about how we need to be better. Cool. We're like doing all of these things. It's no big deal. All topics, but people avoid those ones. And so they only stick with the ones that don't move the relationship forward and are boring as heck. And they talk about those things. And so it's just so important to do it. So we got to keep this one short. I don't even know what time it is. Let me check my time here, guys. So before
make sure that we don't go over.
Go over. So I guess we got like a few more minutes before I go on, babe. Like, I just know for like me, I never got rejected necessarily by you a ton, but I think it was more of like, not now, tonight, we'll do it tonight. Oh no, the kids are up right now. So that would have been the rejection.
Yeah.
More so than like, dude, I don't freaking want to be with you.
Right.
And it was still later. But to me, the rejection in those moments was like, well, she's not like excited to have sex with me. It needs to be planned out at 8:45 tonight. We can have sex. Like, that's not passionate. That's not hot. And that's not spontaneous and desirable. It's like, oh yeah, let's go. Yeah. Like, we're excited to like, all right, cool. It's like excitement to go do it. So that's what the rejection was for me, was that you were just more like, well, yeah, we're going to do it tonight. And to me, it felt like, well, then by the time the night came around, it was like, all right. And then you'd be like, all right, well, cool. The lights have to be off. All right, cool. It's going to be this position. All right, cool. Here's how I'm just going to lay here. And it was like, well, that doesn't make me feel desired. Like, you're actually into me at all.
That was checking a box, basically, almost. I mean, that's what it probably came across to you as.
And you still enjoyed it, because one of the jokes we always say is 100% finish rate. Yeah, right?
Absolutely. I enjoyed it, and I think it was just, we know why. I mean, didn't have confidence. We've gone down that rabbit hole before of how I was for myself. So I don't want to go all into that, but yeah, I still enjoyed it as well also. But that was a learning curve for me of the things that we had to change and go through and change in our marriage to get it to a point where it is now.
And it hurt, right? Because the identity that I had in my life for the longest time, and I've spoken on this on the podcast many times, was that I was a failure, right? Like, that I wasn't good enough, that I was, all of that, I guess, the identity of that. And so then now when my wife's like, well, later on, it was just like, well, that's another thing. And then it was like, I had gotten rejected for jobs, and like I had tried to grow businesses, and then they didn't work. And so it was like, well, now my wife's not even interested in me. So then it's like, it feels, after a while, it really hurts, to it all compounds. And then, of course, the way the devil works, he plays and he twists those, and he something else, where it wasn't that you weren't attracted to me. I wasn't the guy I am today, and I'm not like bragging on that, but I wasn't the guy that now, where you have to like, it changes that. Now it changed you, and because a big part of it was because who I became bled over onto you, and you became somebody that you see yourself different. So then you see me different, because I was a big part of that, right? Well, obviously it's all God, but I obviously were the tools he uses. And so it changed that, right? But I wasn't attractive like that I am now in those aspects.
Right.
And so it really bleeds over. And I think that most people just don't understand that there is a lasting effect of it when we just say, nah, not now, not now. And after a while, it would be like a friend. If somebody you keep asking a friend, and this is for the women out there, if you keep asking a friend, every week or two, if they want to go out to lunch and they keep telling you, hey, yeah, we'll get back to me. Well, we totally, I'm just really busy right now, or it's like I got so much on my plate, and they keep doing it. After you ask so many times, guess what's going to happen? You're going to stop asking because you don't want them to tell you no, and you're immediately going to think they don't love me as much. This friend they're not really my true friend. You're probably going to talk crap about them behind their back. And then you're going to look at all the other things they're doing. Well, they're spending time with so-and-so and they're doing all these other things. They don't got time for me anymore. You're going to build up the story in your head, which might be true and it might not be.
Right.
It's the same thing for men. And then now we're going through that on those other things. I don't care who you are. If you think you're this freaking badass, excuse my language, but alpha male, dude, we're all very, very human and real. And I'll put my alpha up against anybody's alpha out there. But I'm also going to be vulnerable and real that there's things that sometimes hurt, right, in life. I don't deal with that one anymore, but that would hurt then. There's things of rejection now that I struggle with in certain things. I can look and suck it up with the best of them if I want to. I don't. That's why I share them on here. So it helps other men out of what it actually is. And so this is for the women out there. This is for the men out there. We see you. We understand it. But with that being said, you have to take the mirror and you have to put it on yourself and you say, I'm going to be the solution to this. And it might be a 6-month process. It might be a year process. It might be 2-year process. But whether or not my wife ever takes notice, this will be worth it because it's worth it for me. And I'm going to become a better man, whether or not. And when you decide that, you can't lose because whether they ever notice it, which 100% of the time they will, it just might take a little bit longer for certain people. You become better. And that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Between that and then, like you said earlier, just about being vulnerable and talking about it. Because I think a lot of time it's the delivery of how people are sharing with them. Like, oh, you're just not giving me sex, and that's like the only thing that they bring to the table with it, instead of having those vulnerable conversations, and I think that's a big chunk of it, is that people they come across wrong. And so then the wife or the husband, whoever this is talking about, is like, that's all they say is, you just don't give me sex.
Well, then they throw shade on the person of it. It's like, yeah, of course you're not going to give me sex. You're just playing on your effing phone.
Right.
Oh, what? Bachelorette more important than us again?
Right.
Sure, you're just putting the kids before me. Yeah, you can give them. And it's like,
instead of sitting down, having a loving conversation about, this is how I've been feeling, and I think that we could do better. But, instead of dealing with that in a different way, they're dealing with it wrong.
Totally. You're throwing darts instead of just like having well, I've tried that. Well, no, you haven't done it long enough. I promise you, in the right ways, you haven't done it long enough.
Or you're not the person that you need to become first, even sometimes, as you were saying beforehand too.
It always starts with that because you have to still be this amazing person. And that often changes throughout the course of relationship due to kids, through business, stress, financial, whatever. You change. Theo spoke about this on the podcast I did with him, where he was just talking about, I was doing this other job that I thought I wanted. I did the job, and then I started realizing I was stressed. I was irritable. I was all of that. And that's what I was to her. I was to the kids and all of that. And he's like, and what I told him was, I was like, that's not who she married. She never would have married you had you were that person in the first place. That's not what she was attracted to. She was attracted to yourself, who was fun and all that other stuff. This is just what life stuck with you. You just got to bring that back out of you. And that's what they did, because they had a loving conversation of why he wasn't wanting to stick with the job and switching it up and shared his feelings. They talked about it. That's why quality time is so important, and boom, boom, boom on all of that. And so guys, this is where I just want to say, like, one last thing is, we see you women, we see you as well, but guys, talk about this stuff. This is where you have to spend quality time together. This is where, if you want the blueprint that we have, if you haven't got our blueprint by now, if you follow us on social media, I'm sure you haven't seen it. You've seen it. We can send it to you. Shoot me a DM, Tommy McCall Straw on Instagram, and I'll shoot it over to you, and go through it and realize how we actually do what we do in relationship. And so there was just one last thing, is one of our most recent testimony, whatever you want to say, had a verge of divorce, like crazy, like terrible things happening in their relationship. If anybody's relationship come back from the death, God really made it work with this one. But she sent him a text message the other day, and he shot it over to me. He was like, bro, do I have like the unlimited American Express card? He's like, dude, your leadership and your coaching is something that's mind blowing, because what she said in the text message to him was, I'm so horny for you right now. I will never, ever, ever deny you sex ever again. And it was just, he was like, I can't believe it. And that's not what it was about. Like, and he's not even tripping on that. He's like, dude, he's like, at one point that mattered to me. He's like, we're still having plenty of sex. He's like, I just don't care as much anymore because I'm filled up in so many other areas. And so, guys, we'll get that to you. Let us know. We'll get it over to you. If you guys could also just rate this podcast 5 stars, it means a lot to us. We're really wanting to push and grow this even more so than it already has, to really get God's word out there about bold, raw, real leadership in the marriage and what real Christians actually look like: strong, faith-filled women and strong, faith-filled men doing big things. And so this was a quick one. So we love y'all. God bless y'all. Have an amazing day.
Bye.